This year,
Sony
gamed all MCU fans by putting out one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I love superhero movies. There aren't many I could say I never enjoyed, but in some cases, like in February, we were given one of the worst superhero movies ever made by
Sony.
And in comparison to the generational run they were having pre-Endgame, this has just added to the disappointment. Madam Web might be the worst follow-up in the Spider-Verse of movies they could have done. And honestly, Madam Web had me in the first half, making me forget I was watching a
Sony
movie due to the lack of actual superheroes, considering the main characters are in suits for less than a full minute. This movie really felt like something I would find playing on Disney on a Saturday night because of how basic and bad it was. And by the time you're done watching this video, you'll be glad you didn't waste your money to go see it. And if you did see it, why would you punish yourself like that? I will give a quick recap of the movie and a comparison to other Spider heroes, because after watching this movie twice, I realized no one else deserves to suffer what my brain did for a total of 4 hours. This movie begins in 1973 and takes place in a rainforest in Peru. And this woman's name is Constance, and the dude behind her is her partner Ezekiel. They are hunting for a mythical spider said to give powers, as we already know. But Constance is more focused on its healing powers because it'll cure cancer or something. After searching for less than 3 minutes, she comes back with the spider, and she starts showing it off on the verge of tears. Then out of nowhere, Ezekiel starts crashing out. He wipes out all the soldiers, including his partner, who is pregnant, by the way. But then out of nowhere, a bunch of spider men come down the trees to see who was shooting up their forest. They see this woman dying on the floor, so they take her to their cave and let one of their spiders bite her to save her life. Except that bitch died. But the baby survived, so I'm sorry Constance and rest in peace, but Ezekiel now has spider powers, and 30 years later, he starts having these visions, kind of like enhanced spider sense, and he sees himself getting bodied by 3 spider women in the future. This is the only time in the movie we see any of the girls in their spider suits, and not only is this fight not even real, but it never even happens, and so Ezekiel plans to off them. So we can see he still does not give a fuck about women 30 years later. If I was having dreams like that, I'd be sleeping kinda happy. After all, Sydney Sweeney is one of them girls fighting me. And if I had his spider powers, I just assume that's the kind of shit I'd be into now. But Ezekiel isn't having none of it. So he wakes up from his vision and realizes they're real. So he plots to kill these same girls before they kill him. The time is now 2003, and our main character, Cassie, daughter of Constance, has been having visions too. They spent about like 30 minutes explaining that, so I'm skipping to the important part. Now Cassie is also a paramedic, and while she's on duty, she has a vision of her coworker dying. In an attempt to save him, she tries to stop him from driving, and he died. Cassie predicted this correctly, and seeing as her powers make her depressed, she has to take off of work until she could calm down them visions. If you're wondering how Ezekiel is going to find these teenage girls, well, he has access to national security surveillance and can look at cameras all over the city. And if you're wondering how he has that, well, before Ezekiel was having night terrors about Sydney Sweeney, he was using his web shooters to steal the passwords from the lady in his bed. He's able to track down the girls through these cameras and see them all conveniently going into a train station. So he decides he's gonna finish them off. Cassie decides she doesn't want to be depressed anymore and goes to her coworker's funeral. But on her way there, she has a vision of Ezekiel bodying these girls on the train, which is a common New York City occurrence. Once Cassie stopped tweaking, she yells at the girls and gets them to leave the train station, not before being chased by cops and Ezekiel, who attacked everyone in the train station but the girls. After escaping, Cassie steals a taxi and we're introduced to the girls, Maddie, Julia, and Anya, who are all very different. Maddie is a badass kid who causes trouble. Julia is a quiet good girl, and Anya is just a sarcastic smartass, or at least that's how they're introduced. Cassie then drives off into the forest to go into hiding because the cops think she abducted these kids, and the Spider-Man is trying to take them out. But Cassie decides to leave the forest to go find more about the spider guy. Once returning home, she goes through her mom's research and she thinks she got the power to jump on a wall, which she doesn't, meaning that she's f***ed. The girls, being hungry and stuck in a forest, decide to go head over to a diner to get some food, but get distracted by a boys' basketball team. And while they're over there flirting, they get spotted and the spider dude starts heading over there. Cassie comes back to the forest and sees that the girls are gone, so she follows their footprints and catches them dancing for these guys in the diner, but it's already too late. Ezekiel runs into that diner and puts them all in a shirt. The movie could have ended here, and I think it honestly would have been better, but Cassie's powers gave her a do-over, so this was just a vision. So the second time around, she uses the taxi to body Ezekiel and escape with the girls. As a guy with Spider-Man powers, you should never be getting stunned like this by a car. He truly went out sad. And again, Cassie runs away. To a motel this time though. And the girls confess they can't even go home due to all their parents being absent in their lives. And as sad as it was, Cassie had no choice but to go back out and find more clues. So I'm watching Batman now, but without any of the fight scenes. Cassie goes back to the diner, and once she gets there, she goes into a vision-like state, where she's able to talk to Ezekiel, and he basically tells her, fuck them kids, they have to die indubitably. Cassie learns that Ezekiel can poison people, so she decides to teach the girls CPR in case they get injected by it, and it becomes the most obvious foreshadowing moment in the whole movie, and you will see why later. After this, Cassie gets onto the first flight out of there as soon as possible, and goes to Peru to relocate and figure out her life. Wait, never mind. She just went to find out where her vision powers came from, and how to beat Ezekiel. But while doing this, she ends up meeting the same spider guy who saved her mother when she was dying. The spider dude allows her to see the cause of her mother's death and even speak to her mother through the vision, which is when Cassie finds out the reason the mother wanted the spider was because Cassie had an illness, and as we know, that spider can cure anything. The only thing that ruins the scene was the way it ended, where this old spider guy gentrified the shit out of Uncle Ben's quote and words it as,
when you take on responsibility, great power will come.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
During this time in Peru, the girls are moved out of the motel and into a house owned by Cassie's partner, Ben. But Ben's sister just went into labor, meaning they have to go to the hospital. Not even 2 minutes on the road, Maddie is seen by a street camera, which means Ezekiel is making his 17th attempt at trying to take out some teenage girls. But guess what? Cassie just returned in time to have a vision, again, of the girls being attacked. So in GTA 6 fashion, she steals an ambulance this time, and right as Spider God pulls up on the girls, Cassie busts through a billboard with the ambulance, which doesn't even hit the dude at all. Somehow though, he still managed to get hurt from the fall, I guess, but Cassie already took the girls and was on the run. Ezekiel was having none of that, so he chases them down, but Cassie is already hitting 100 on the dash, and she's gone. Cassie heads to the docks, which she knows has a warehouse filled with fireworks due to being called over there about a fire earlier in the movie. She calls for backup on the walkie-talkie and starts planting charges in the warehouse so that once Spider Guy arrives, he will get boomed. A wall gets blown up in the process, which lets the girls escape to the roof where the backup helicopter is waiting. But it can't reach them because of the fireworks, so they shout for them to get on top of the billboard next to them. Cassie gains her spider senses and starts blocking fireworks left and right, but once Ezekiel gets up there, he's fed up, and he just blows up the helicopter and starts throwing hands with everyone. And in typical Disney superhero movie fashion, Cassie unlocks her great power and makes cloned shadows of herself. Yes, cloned shadows, which save all the girls' lives, and Ezekiel, in disbelief, starts throwing haymakers at Cassie. But then, Ezekiel gets hit in the head with a large chunk of metal, and while Cassie begins taunting him, the billboard collapses with both of them on it, and Ezekiel fucking dies in the fall, literally getting squished. And Cassie falls into the ocean and begins drowning because she got paralyzed. And then she gets hit in the eye with a firework while underwater. Yes, a firework, which also blinds her. But don't worry, because not only can Julia swim, but she's a trained lifeguard who pulls Cassie to the surface where all the girls do CPR they were conveniently taught to save her life. The movie ends with all of them in Cassie's house, who's wearing a blindfold and in a wheelchair, where she gives the girls the weakest speech of all time about how they'll become leaders, fight for equality, and be feminist, I think. Basically, the girls had no relevance. They were just regular human teenage girls. The whole movie. Literally. I just want to end the recap by saying the movie is not that bad, but I do feel that it is for a very specific audience. Like, very specific. But I think the movie is made to laugh at itself, and no one could convince me that it should be taken seriously. Now, out of respect to the actual spider heroes who have powers and wore suits in their movies, I will do my comparison to the actual goats of the Spider-Verse. Toby started as some geek in his first Spider movies. In the first movie, he grows a pair and becomes a man, but even after that amazing character development, once Bully Maguire hit the movie screens, that shit changed a generation. But in a movie like Spider-Man 3, which was shit, Toby got a broken back. How you a superhero with back problems? I mean, in 2 he stopped the train, which was pretty tough, but this dude fought literal sand and then had to get saved by Harry, who died for him. I'm gonna give him some credit, he did pull Gwen Stacy and MJ, who was a bop, but how you spin for Ben and get the wrong dude? Nevertheless, I think he's better than Madam Web, who started as a paramedic and then turned out blind and paralyzed. Pick a struggle. The whole movie, she protects these girls and unlocks her powers right before losing 2 of her senses. And honestly, she's a real one for that, cause her change was looking dull, and yet she bodied the guy who took out their mother without having powers. Unlike Toby. Now we got Tom, and I'm gonna be honest, he pulled Zendaya. He doesn't have a crazy best friend, and that's about it. I don't give a damn about Tom because, you know, he had Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, and the whole damn Avengers on his side. Tom is respectfully carried through all 3 movies, but to be honest, he was a new superhero, so that's fair. But he could barely handle Vulture or whatever, and I could beat up Vulture easily without the powers. He's old and he has a slappable face. He fought a guy whose whole identity was based on holograms, then got exposed by that guy and had to destroy the multiverse to save his identity. So Madam Web and Peter Tom Parker already have a lot in common. Madam Web has these magical vision powers, sure, but against Thanos or any Avenger level threat, she gets killed easily. She was lucky Ezekiel was a weak ass Spider-Man. Andrew went through some real shit. He lost Gwen, and this guy fought electricity, an actual goblin, lizard, mutant, turtle thing, and his own best friend, who killed Gwen. Andrew is my favorite by far, as you could tell, and Cassie or Madam whatever the fuck can't compare to any of them at all. Miles Morales is in his own lane for now until he gets his own live action movie, but we all know Miles has his own throne in the long line of spider people. That's beyond the point though. Madam Web was lacking in everything related to superheroes, and I'd assume it was intentional to give Cassie powers that aren't crazy good and she still wins, but the whole movie revolved around coincidentally convenient things happening. The suits for the girls were cool, but if they do make a sequel to this dog shit, can we see actual fighting and not 3 girls jumping an old man in spider suits through a vision? Like, this movie could have been good, but the writers were clearly hot. From the visions to the shadow clones that told me everything I needed to know. Fuck Madam Web.
Silly Sunny kinda bad though.